Welcome back to another episode of Cryptic Surgery, where I solve the toughest cryptic clues that you've sent in throughout the week. Today, I'm solving cryptic clues from The Guardian, Scottish Daily Mail, Private Eye, and the Financial Times. Let's get started. And beginning with this one from The Guardian, 17 down, bit of basic education in a bank that's more culturally affected. And I myself have just removed the cultural affection of Ibiza Final Boss away. Those glasses have been put down. So where do we start with this particular clue? The first things as we're going along, bit of basic education. So that's suggesting that we have to take a bit of, or at least, maybe one letter, it could be two letters of, another way of thinking about basic education. And that is going to be in a bank. And we've got to be careful. Is that a bank like a financial institution, or is it a bank like a slope on a riverbank? That's more culturally affected. And so we can suspect that more culturally affected is probably the definition here because of how the rest of the clue is structured. Bit of basic education is in a bank, which gives us the definition. So the way in which that we can start with the beginning here is bit of basic education. Well, what's another way of thinking about basic education? It's the three R's: writing, reading, arithmetic. And if you just take a bit of that, you only take one R. And so that's where this R is coming from for the definition. And that is going to be in another way of saying a bank. And so the R is not going to go at the start here. We're going to be moving it in a five-letter word for a bank. And so then you have to sort of play around with different words for bank. Is it like the institution, or is it like a slope? Is it something else? Well, in this case, it's a tier, like if you're going up, like a gradient or something like that. And so literally a bank, a tier. So that is, we've got the A and then TIER. And we've just got to find out where to put the R in it to get something that means more culturally affected. You actually have to, you have to shift it along one to get the word artier. If one is artier, you're more culturally affected. Moving along then to this one from the Scottish Daily Mail for six down, bitter and sour when blocked by resistance. Now, the word that stood out to me when passing this clue was resistance. And the reason why is that resistance is often abbreviated to just the letter R. And that is the case in this clue. The reason why that abbreviation is there is because it refers to Ohm's law in science, which, if I remember, is voltage, or V, equals current, or I, times resistance, or R. And so that's where this is coming from. And interestingly, this resistance, the R, is blocking another word. So R is not going to be at the start of the word here. It's going to be in this word somewhere because it's blocking or stopping another word from being complete. It's going to just slot right in the middle somewhere. And so then we're looking for a four-letter word here, probably then for sour, because bitter is right at the start. Well, we've already got resistance at the end, so the definition has to be at the start. And so bitter is probably going to be that then. The and, I'm not so sure on how that, readily fits. It's probably just grammatical here, but it is a bit awkward. But sour, then, another way of saying sour is if something is acidic, or, if you're looking for a synonym, acid. And the R is blocking acid. It's right in the middle there to give you a word here for acrid, which is to mean bitter. The third of the five clues today, then, with private eye. 21 across. Stuffed china added to currency units. Okay, so we've got 9 letters here, so it's a fairly big word. Where are we going to start? So my assumption was that stuff is going to be the definition. Reason why is because the rest of this clue says China, or another word meaning China, is added to currency units. And so we need another maybe a type of currency unit and it's plural. So we know that there's probably going to be an S at the end of this. And then we're looking for, a currency unit that is added to another word for China. Now, China in cryptics often is going to be a reference sometimes to Cockney rhyming slang. And unless you're familiar with it, you're looking at China going, country, maybe the capital letter is a Mr. X, and actually we're talking about China like in like with plates and things like that. Well, in this case, China is a reference to Cockney rhyming slang, and it is China plate, but then that rhymes with mate, and so you call your mates China. And so mate is, in fact, the word here that fills up at least four of the letters here. And that's going to be added to currency units. And so we've got the S at the end. We're looking for a four-letter word, really, that if we put it next to mate, it means stuff. And you can probably guess what the rest of it is just from going, well, what is another word for stuff that begins with M, or at least is MATE? And that is materials. That is the answer. And so what's the currency unit? A real. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but a currency unit you find in Iran, I think, in Oman, in Yemen. And so it's plural, as we said, so it's reals. And so all together, materials for stuff. Now, on to the last two clues here, both of them from the Financial Times. We have this one, 8 across, 6 down, almost scared climbing a hill with parrot, perhaps. So a bit of an absurd surface read here. The word that is going to be important to us here is climbing. You will note that this is 6 down, and so really, I've taken this clue out of its context in the actual crossword itself. We would be filling this word in as in like 6 down, and climbing on a down clue is a reversal indicator because it's the word but just climbing instead of going straight down. And so whatever word we're looking for here, part of this is going to be a word or at least a couple of letters but just backwards. Now the difficult thing here is you've got almost scared, and so you're thinking, okay, if something's almost, that means that the word is not yet complete. It's a deletion indicator. Typically, the last letter of that word is deleted. And, I'd be tempted to go with almost scared, that is to say, scared, but without the D, and you get scare. And then if it's climbing, you just reverse it. But then you have ERACS, and then you're trying to work that out with another way of saying a hill, and you don't get very far. And so you've got to find, this is the tricky part, another word for scared, delete that last word, and then reverse it, and then you've still got to complete the rest of the clue. Now, the word we're looking for here is timid. And so if you're scared, you're timid, but it's almost, and so you delete the D, and then it's climbing, so you reverse it to get IMIT. So you can see it's Timmy, right? But just IMIT. And then you've still got the four letters. And so you've got parrots, perhaps. And so perhaps is another tricky one because perhaps can sometimes be an anagram indicator, right? A word, perhaps, right? The letters, are you sure that they're in the right order? And so this is then tricky because then you're going, okay, is almost scared the definition? And we're rearranging parrots for 6 letters, but then you've got to work backwards from there. Climbing a hill, and is that 2 letters to go with the parrot? So a lot of different roads that you could go down here that are quite tricky. But really, then what we're looking for here is, well, is it a parrot perhaps in the sense of a parrot could be an example of the answer? And that's what's happening here because you got emit, and then you're going, okay, a parrot is somebody, if you parrot somebody, you're repeating back to them something. And if you've got that context with this word beginning with I, the solution could be imitator, which is what a parrot's doing. And so then the last few letters here, then, a hill, another word for a hill is a tor. That is to say, a hill, a tor. And you're putting that at the end, and that does give you imitator for a parrot, which is an example of one. Last clue of this episode, then, with 16 across: ruined Lint's top chocolate, etc. Removed addictive substance. So, a fun surface read here. Lint's chocolate, obviously, very addicting. I mean, not for everybody, but certainly for myself. And it's been ruined. We've taken that substance out. The first thing that stood out is ruined. Ruined is typically an anagram indicator that we will take a word, we'll ruin it, rearrange it in some way. So that's why I suspect ruined may not be the definition. And so maybe we'd look at the end of the clue for the definition. So if we go on that assumption, Lint's top. So that is telling us that we're taking the top letter of Lint, which is the L. That's the first letter, the top letter. And so I don't know if the L is going to be there because, again, we might be ruining all of this. And so I'm just putting it at the start now for now, just to bank it. We've then got chocolate, etc. And then this is the tricky part. The hyphen is a misdirect. So a few times in a couple of other morning cryptic videos, we've seen punctuation is it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's typically used as misdirects, as decoration to make something grammatical. And in this case, it is a misdirect because what it's telling us here is that etc. These three letters, etc, need to be removed from chocolate. And so if you take out the etc from chocolate, you end up with chocolat, and then we're ruining that. And that should give us then another word for an addictive substance, which in this case is alcohol. And that's it for today's clues. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Please do send in your own clues for me to answer in the next iteration of this series. The other thing is, Morning Cryptic, the dominant part of this channel is we post daily cryptic clues for beginners to solve. So if you're just getting into cryptics or want to have a daily challenge, please do join in. Thanks so much.